And welcome back to Hannity. While there are plenty of questions being raised about President Obama's deal with the nuclear Iran, one of the biggest concerns comes from my next guest, the wife of Pastor Saeed Abedini, who's been in prison in Iran for more than a year. Now, the Abedini family and its supporters believe the talks with Iran were the best hope for securing the pastor's release, and they are now blasting the administration for failing to find a solution during these so-called negotiations. Now, Saeed Abedini is an American citizen who was detained in Iran for practicing Christianity, and he remains in a very dangerous prison today where his wife is concerned he may not survive. Joining me now to explain is the pastor's wife, Naghmeh Abedini, and representing their family from the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow. Mrs. Abedini, thanks for being with us. Why don't you tell us a story about your husband and how he got detained there?
He was there working on an orphanage, government-approved orphanage, working with the Iranian government for Muslim kids and children, and he traveled to Iran more than 10 times since 2009. The kids and I actually traveled with him in 2011. We felt safe. We were working with the government, and unfortunately, he left in June to finish up the orphanage, make the final approval for the final board member. And he never returned. The Iranian government put him under house arrest from July until September, and they put him in Evin prison in September of 2012. And he's been given an 8-year sentence because of Christian gatherings, which occurred in between the year 2000 2005. So there was nothing related to his recent trip. And about a month ago, he's been moved to an even more dangerous prison with inmates that are on death row for murders and rape. Didn't that happen after the administration asked for his release? He got sent to a much tougher prison. Isn't that true? Exactly. You know, our President Obama called and asked for his release. Secretary of State asked for his release, and Iran's reaction was to move him to a worse prison. And into a worse ward, not just a political ward, but a ward that's filled with murderers and rapists. And they did that on the day that they were chanting death to America. So this is not a confidence-building step on their part. They're not sending a very positive message. And this would have been our best chance, leverage of getting him out of there alive. Well, what is your reaction and message to the president? I mean, here he's negotiating a huge deal that Iran needs. These sanctions were working. They're going to get access to billions of dollars, in some cases more, and yet he had an opportunity to negotiate the release of your husband, and he did not. What do you want to say to him? You know, he could have had that be an easy precondition. He could have easily said, release the Americans before we even continue with negotiations, and it really has been devastating to our family. It's obviously not a priority, this human rights issue, Iran being the top violator of human rights, and here's an American citizen wasting away. Here's a family broken apart. I mean, this is the hardest time of the year for us. Christmas and Thanksgiving's approaching, and we'd hoped he'd be home by now, and we don't even know if he will survive the new prison. Jay, what's your reaction to this, and have you been speaking to people maybe at the State Department and elsewhere in the administration?
We have. Sean, on Friday, I sent a letter to Secretary of State Kerry urging him to secure the release of Saeed Abedini and the other 2 Americans that are held by the Iranian regime prior to inking this agreement. We have now eased the sanctions against Iran, allowing billions of dollars to go forward. We are allowing humanitarian aid, and we did not have standing next to Secretary of State Kerry Saeed Abedini or the other 2. That's an outrage, and I hold the president responsible for this because as a precondition to signing and executing this deal and easing the sanctions, it would have been easy for the Iranian regime to release the Americans if, in fact, it was a priority for the United States. Apparently, that's not the case, and I was on a call, as we've been discussing this with the State Department for months, and I said today, you know, the problem is every time there's a mention of Saeed Abedini at whatever level it is, you're always telling me there's no response from the Iranians. So here it was that we generate today, or over the weekend, over $5 billion of aid, plus humanitarian relief, and we don't get the return of Americans that are being held hostage by the very people we're negotiating with at the table. It's inexcusable, Sean. It's a tragedy of unbelievable proportions for Naghmeh and her family, and I think it should cause every American that's watching this broadcast now to say, would my country leave me? What is it with the State Department and this president that we always pick the wrong side on Middle East matters? But consistently, that's what we're doing.
Nagme, will give you the last word.
Exactly. I think as America, as someone who's raised in the U.S., it breaks my heart that my government has left me and my husband in a time we need them most. And in speaking, being very strict and very outspoken against the Iranian government's continuous violation of human rights. There's a family hurting. This might be on the news many times. Many people hear about it, but really, there's 2 little children that are crying every single night, asking for their dad to come home. Today they're praying, God, don't let him die. They're really worried about him, and this is too much for a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old to handle.
I hope and pray that he gets home soon. I can't, for the life of me, understand why this wasn't part of these, quote, negotiations. We'll continue to follow this. Thank you so much, both of you, for being with us.